People think that because they've tried something in the past and failed, that they can't do it. And all that really means is that at the time, they weren't the person who could do it. You cannot let a past version of yourself determine the fate of the person that you are today. Failure isn't a death sentence, it's an opportunity.
There are a million different ways to approach your goals, regardless of what they may be. The one non-negotiable is hard fucking work. Working your ass off. Whether you want to be successful in your fitness, your finances, your business, your career, your family life, your relationships, they all will require hard fucking work at some point, if not all the fucking time.
What's up, everybody? So welcome to another episode of the Jungle Podcast. And today, I have a very awesome guest on the show today. I have Mr. James Anderson out of Akron, Ohio. James hails from Streetsboro, which wasn't too far from where I went to high school. I went to Rootstown. There's a few years age difference, but James is like the rest of the guys that I have on the show. He has overcome adversity. He came out of the pits and has basically made an amazing life for himself. And this dude is straight up killing it as far as physical fitness goes, making a great life for himself. So as soon as I caught wind of him, he was just somebody that I had to have on the show. So without further ado, guys, this is James Anderson. James, go ahead and say hi to everybody real quick.
What's up?
All right. So James, I'm just going to get right into things real quick. So you went to Streetsboro High School. I'm assuming you grew up in Streetsboro. Why don't you tell everybody who James Anderson is and was, growing up?
Yeah. So I went to high school in Streetsboro. I was born in Cleveland. We moved to Streetsboro when I was in second grade, and I grew up there. I grew up just chilling, skateboarding with friends, stuff like that. I started using when I was 15, smoking weed, drinking. But a kid down the street, his dad had broke his back and was prescribed Oxycontin and Percocets. So, by 16, I had discovered, opiates and started using those. I didn't realize, the repercussions of that, until we were on a family vacation and I was super sick and I thought I had the flu or something. I got back and my buddy's like, "No, man, you were dope sick." I was like, "What's that?"
Yeah.
So, my parents kind of knew, they knew what was going on. They put me in an IOP treatment up in Beechwood. I did that for a bit, discovered 12-step meetings, started going to 12-step meetings in high school. And I had a sponsor, I was working steps and everything back in 04. And then when I graduated high school, I told myself I don't know, you might be too young to be an addict, right? I figured I'd just go drink and party a bit. And if things got out of hand, I knew where to go, except it took 10 years to get back to the rooms.
So your first visit into the rooms was obviously through IOP treatment, and then you just kind of went back on a run. Man, I get it. Being that young, you don't understand the repercussions, and I got hooked on opiates at an early age, so I get it, man. That's a rough. So how old were you at that point then? You said you were 16?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So this all progresses, and basically you start doing stints in jail, or you're...
Yeah. So 18, I graduate high school and my parents are like, "Follow our rules or get the fuck out." And I was like, "Okay, bye." And moved out to Kent, crashed on my buddy's couch, and I was living there for, I got arrested for the first time that summer, right out of high school. It was just an underage drinking thing. But by that fall, I had got my first felony drug charge for trafficking marijuana. And that's another thing. At 18, you know, I didn't grow up around a bunch of people getting in trouble, and I wasn't familiar with the system and stuff like that. So I had no idea what a felony at 18 meant for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
So, you know, I'm like, whatever, no big deal. I'm on felony probation now, and I'm trying to. I wasn't using opiates anymore at this point. I was just drinking, but now and smoking. But now I can't do that because I got to drop these urines every week. So I was like, all right, well, these Percocets, you know, they only stay in your system a couple days. I can just dabble there and then still piss clean. And that drug me back into that whole world, except that world had changed a lot. And now I was an adult. And so, you know, things went pretty crazy. In and out of jail, I went and did 4 months in '08, 8 months in 2009 for another drug trafficking charge. 2011, I got my third drug trafficking charge, and that's when they revoked my probation, sent me to prison. Did a year and a half down in North Central, and then got out. Was in TMRC coming home, and you know, I was back in the rooms talking with people, and I didn't get honest with them about what was going on with me or what I was thinking. And the day I got out, I used again, and basically went off the rails for about 9 months, and was over it. I actually went to a meeting and I was like, if I don't get clean, I'm gonna die. I know it. I'd already OD'd a couple times, and so October 13th, 2013, I went to treatment up in Glen Bay, and October 14th is my clean date.
So I was reading an article about you that Channel 3 did on you a while ago. And in the article, you made a comment where you were waiting on your dope dealer, and basically you decided to go to a meeting instead. So,
Yeah.
I mean, at that point, you had something rolling around in your head that shit wasn't right. I mean, at that point, I mean, to me, that indicates you were fed up at that point. Like, you knew you had to make a change. You just didn't know how, where, what, when, you know what I mean? So what was the defining moment that made you actually sober up and get it together and just continue down that path?
Yeah, so for me, it was actually going to prison. It was the longest that I'd been clean my whole adult life, you know, by force, but I was able to like get healthy in there and, you know, exercise and make decisions about how I was going to spend my day. And then by the time you know, by the time that day rolled around where I was waiting on my dope boy, like I had been over it, you know, I had been using against my will for a long time. I didn't want to be living the way that I was living anymore. I had tried to get clean on my own, but I just couldn't do it. And I was sitting there waiting on him, and I'm just like, dude, this is pathetic. Like I just felt like this big, you know? And I felt like I had more freedom in prison than I did on the street as a using addict. Like all the decisions in my day-to-day life were made by the dope. I couldn't make plans to do anything because how am I going to get money? Who's going to answer their phone? Am I going to have to drive to Cleveland? Am I going to be able to cop in Akron? Like everything was about getting money and getting dope. So my life was just consumed with using, and I didn't even want to be doing it. Yeah. And so I was just, I just felt like my life, really that glimpse of what life could look like, not dope sick all the time, kind of sparked the idea that like I wasn't meant to be living my life the way that I was living it. And
dude, oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah, and so in that moment, I just I felt like something needed to change. Like I was finally ready, like to never have to live that way again.
That's awesome. So I want to reel it back because you just said something. You said you basically felt like Prison, it was the same for me in prison. It was, I could function in prison as a healthy, normal individual, and I had never felt that in my adult life.
Yeah.
When I was in prison, the amount of decisions I got to make on a daily basis, I was capable of making, and it felt good making what few choices that I had to make during the day and being functioning and feeling like I was. And that's so wild to say, but my mom asked me, she's asked me several times what actually, because I went to Lake Erie and I was in Lake Erie when CCA took over, and it was basically drugs nonstop everywhere. It was wild up there when CCA took over, and everything was at my disposal, but I had made that choice once I got there and once I had seen and felt what sobriety looked like, that's the path I wanted. That was kind of like the defining moment. I mean, outside of like not seeing my kids and stuff like that, but I get it, dude. And that's such a wild, it's so wild to think that it takes somebody going to prison for that to actually register upstairs and for it to come to fruition. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
I can relate to that 100%. So you go to prison, you went to North Central, you come home. What was reintegration like for you? What did you struggle finding a job? Is that when you decided to go into personal training? Tell me a little bit about your reintegration.
Yeah, so I mean, like after I got clean, so I came home, I used a bunch, I was landscaping or something. I got clean, and I started. I was working at a car wash in the winter because I got clean like that in end of October. So I was working at a car wash in the winter for like $7 an hour, full time, 40 hours a week, and it sucked. And then I got a job waiting tables, actually. Well, actually, I started busing, but this restaurant that I had applied to 9 months earlier when I got out of prison, and I lied on my application and said that my work experience, which was legit, was way more current than it was, trying to hide the gap of while I was gone.
Yeah.
And they knew the people and they called me on it, and they're like, yeah, dude, we can't hire you. And I'm like, well, that makes sense. 9 months later, I'm working at this car wash looking for jobs, like, dude, this sucks. And they're opening a new store in Kent, and they're doing open applications. So I go out there, I fill out an application. Now I'm in the rooms, I'm practicing honesty. I check the felony box, we'll discuss an interview. I go to hand it in, and the dude turns around, and it's the owner of the restaurant, the dude who I had interviewed with 9 months ago. And I'm like, oh, shit. So he walks me over, we sit down, and a few minutes in, he realizes who I am and remembers me. And he's like, so what's changed? And I'm like, look, dude, I just got out of rehab. Like, I'm doing this 12-step thing. I really want to change my life around. And we do the interview, and I remember walking out of there feeling like just fucking elevated, dude. Like, it was the first time that I'd been able to just be myself and not have to lie about anything. Like, I just at a job interview, I'm like, dude, I was shooting crack and heroin and like a month ago, but I'm trying hard now. And dude called me back for a second interview, gave me the job, man, an opportunity that he didn't have to give me. I worked at that restaurant for 3 years, and in the process, I was reading a lot of books and studying like entrepreneurship and business and marketing and branding and all these things, because I felt like to live the life I wanted to live, it was going to be really hard to do with my felonies. And so I felt like I was just going to kind of start my own thing. And because fitness was such a big part of my life and my recovery at the time, I mean, obviously still today, but everyone's always asking me, hey, asking me about diet and exercise and stuff. So I decided I'd get certified, started that while I was at the restaurant. And 6 months later, I had built a solid enough business to be able to leave the restaurant, go full-time training. And that was the beginning of James Anderson Ambition.
Okay. So to go back just a little bit, you made a comment about you came out of that interview and you were elevated because you knew it was the guy that you had just lied to, not too far back, so on and so forth. He caught you. And I preach on this constantly. It's the little victories. And it may not be a victory in your eyes at that moment, but the fact that you could make something out of the fact that you were honest for the first time in your life, not the first time in your life, but like you pulled a victory out of what a lot of other people would have determined to be a loss. You know what I mean? And that's
Yeah.
that's a big thing that I preach on constantly, is because there's a lesson in everything. And you always have to build those, you have those steps and you have those building blocks. And as long as you're continuing to try and stack that next block on the other, it gives you something to look back down at. So I mean, being honest at that point, that's something, and I get it. You can hang, and you should have been proud of yourself for that, because I was the biggest, I mean, maybe aside from you, the biggest liar on the planet. You know what I mean? I lied about everything and I was pathological about it. I believed my own bullshit. And so once you get to the point where honesty just becomes a daily practice for you, that's a huge deal, dude. So I'm glad you, at least I'm glad you were able to recognize that and count that as a win. And that's part of the mindset that I think a lot of guys that struggle don't have. It's they would have walked out of that and been like, oh, it was this guy, he's not going to hire me. You know what I mean? I had to be honest about it, and they'd walk out defeated. So that's awesome. I commend you for being able to take that victory where you had it. So you started this personal training business. I mean, I'm a big workout guy. That was another reason that I was adamant that I was not going to let you off the hook. You had to come on the show because I love my weights. And so in another interview of yours that I read, you basically said you're not a runner, you're a weight trainer. So you got into personal fitness. And basically it was people asking you nonstop. And I get it. I looked at personal training when I first came home too. Life just didn't take me in that direction. So now that you've been doing the personal training for a minute, I mean, tell me about your business. Tell me about like how that path has like brought you to where you are. And
Yeah. So, I mean, I started, for me, it was like what drew me into it was the psychological aspect of it. So I'm like huge into personal development, self-development, whatever you want to call it. And which is basically what 12 steps is. Like it's a program that helps me become a better version of myself over time. And as long as I'm willing to put in the work on those steps, I can continue to grow as a human and become a better man. And so I really pursued that in every area of my life when I kind of made that connection. And so fitness was a huge part of it, but I wanted to understand what held people back. Like why so many people struggled to get in good physical shape, why so many people struggled with nutrition, the fears that they had, their doubts about themselves, their abilities. People are scared to just show up in the gym because they don't want to look stupid because they don't know what they're doing. And I wanted to understand those things in order to better help people overcome those things. Because I believe that physically, mentally, spiritually, these are all areas we should be working on. It shouldn't just be two or one. And it's a balancing act, I think. We're always trying to float all three, but I think that the physical aspect is a big area that people leave out. And for me, it was also really helpful for my self-esteem. So, I was bodybuilding. I did pretty well in bodybuilding. I won like my first two shows. I won local, then I won state, and then I went to nationals and took second. And then I was like, well, this is cool, but unless I start, running a bunch of stuff, I'm never going to make a career out of this. So it seemed like it took more than it gave. So then I started really going all in on the training business. but I also want to challenge myself and push myself into areas that I'm uncomfortable in, you know? So I don't want to just be a runner or be a weight trainer. You know, last year I did an Ironman triathlon. I didn't know how to swim. I wasn't ever a cycler. Like I said, if it's really fucking hard, I want to do it. And I want to become the person who can do it. And once I've done it, then it's kind of like, okay, well, what's next? And I kind of just bounce around in these different areas of fitness. Because for me, I believe it's the mindset more than the physical capability. You know, you have to be able to not only believe that this is possible for you, but then you have to show up every day and train this new thing that you're doing that's very different from what you're used to. And, you know, that's really important. So over the years, I've just been doing my own thing while helping people become the best versions of themselves. And, you know, my training business, I've been doing that full time for 7.5 years. It's grown exponentially. I have clients all over the States online, and then I have all my in-person clients here in Akron. And I just get to help a lot of people. It's been great, and it's led to, you know, all sorts of crazy opportunities.
I think you hit the nail on the head with the balancing the psychological, like it's body, mind, spirit. You know what I mean? And a lot of physical trainers get into this profession like, well, I'm just going to tell them to lift these weights over here on this day, eat this over here on that day. A lot of trainers, and I see it at my gym constantly, it's a lot of these trainers don't take time to actually understand what's going on with their clients, what they can do to help build their self-esteem, what they could do. It's the other 33%. You know what I mean? They're just kind of, they're there for the first 66, but once they don't really want to get that entangled with their clients. So to me, it's no wonder. I mean, if you're saying that you cover the back end of that you've done so well for yourself, I mean, that's a big part that I think a lot of trainers leave out. So this is the stuff I want to talk about, because this is what, so you did your Ironman, and you did a half ultra, which is, for those that don't know, that's 50 miles, correct?
Yeah. So,
And
I mean, technically an ultra is anything over a marathon. So like a 50K is considered an ultra, but I look at it like basically 50 miles and up is an ultra. So
okay.
yeah, for what, I don't know, 7 years, I think maybe. I think it was 7 years I did 50 miles.
That's wild, dude. I am 6'6", 300 pounds. There is no way you would ever catch me running. My shins would buckle, dude.
Well, that year was COVID. So like in 2016, I climbed, or for 6 years was when I climbed Mount Kilimanjaro the first time, and I didn't make it. I got real sick, and the medical staff were like, "You're done." And then the following year, or no, the following year was Trolltunga in Norway, and then so that was 5 and 6, and then 7. COVID happened. We couldn't travel, which is what I normally did to do stuff. So I was like, well, shit, what am I going to do? And I basically had like a month to figure out what my challenge was going to be that year. And I was like, okay, well, 50 miles, like that seems crazy enough. It's something I can do here during COVID times. And so I had like just over 3 weeks to train to do 50 miles. And I hadn't ran in like over a year. So basically I just gridded through 50 miles. This 100 miler I've actually trained for.
So I was down at the shop talking to Kenny this morning, and he told me you're trying to do 100 miles in under 30 hours. I did not have time to look up what 100 miles is typically run in. What's the norm for running 100 miles?
So the general cutoff time is 30 hours for a lot of ultras, but there's a lot of different 100-mile races. They have 135-mile races, 240-mile races. So different races have different cutoff times, but generally for a 100-mile race, you have a 30-hour cutoff time,
Okay.
or you DNF. So, ideally, 30 is the max, right? I have to make it in under 30. I'm hoping to do better than that, but
Can you give me a little idea what you're hoping to finish under, or you want to
I
save
mean,
that? You want to save it for the 15th?
we set it up to where noon. So the event on that Sunday is from 10 to 2. Noon is the 30-hour mark. So we set it up to where I kind of had 2 hours either way. I
Okay.
mean, 10 a.m. is when everything starts. It'd be cool to come in around that time. It'd be even cooler if I'm already done and basically just like posted up down the street waiting for people to show up to the event.
Right.
So
No, man, that's awesome. I'm sitting here and I'm looking at my computer and I'm going down through all of your accolades that you've hit every year. So it amazes me, dude. And what amazes me about it is you are the an epitome is a bad word for it, but you're the epitome. I'm going to use it anyway. The epitome of just hard work and dedication. And you made the decision to change your life, and you've stuck to it, and you continue to challenge yourself. And it's not just challenging yourself, it's every year. I mean, you just said it when you were talking about the triathlon. You want to do something that you've never done, that's hard, that you're going to struggle with, so that way. And going back on what you said again, it breeds your confidence. It stacks your confidence. I mean, that's always been a huge part of working out for me as well. It's the confidence, it's the overall general sense of yourself, how you feel, how it makes you feel. So I love that it's heels in the dirt every year to try and find something that's harder than what you did the year before. I want to talk about Kilimanjaro. So your medical team, like you said, pulled the plug on you going up. And did you say you made it back, or you have not made it back yet?
yeah, I did make it back. So last year for 9 years, I summited.
Okay. What was
Yeah.
that?
So, well, I mean, so the first time I went, it was brutal because maybe I was a little, some hubris played a part in that. I assumed, like, I had looked up some people who had climbed it, and I'm like, oh, it can't be that bad. And it's, one of the 7 summits of the world. It's 19,300 feet. So the altitude is no joke.
For people who are listening, and correct me if I'm wrong, it's the 6th largest summit in the world, correct?
So every continent has its own highest peak. It is the tallest freestanding mountain in the world.
Okay.
It is basically it was a volcano. It's a non-active volcano. So it's up there, but there's a lot of peaks in the Himalayas that are like over 20,000. So but it's a big one. It's no joke. So you can't, I live in Ohio. We can't train for altitude, right? If I lived in Colorado or something, it would be different. Here, all you can do is get in really good physical shape. And then the first time you experience that level of altitude, it's just a matter of how well your body responds to it, which is partially genetics, and there's all sorts of stuff that goes into it. So the first time I didn't have health insurance, and there's a medicine that a lot of people take that helps your body produce more red blood cells so that you can absorb more oxygen at higher altitudes. And so we didn't have that medication. The other 3 people in the group that were with us did. They all summited. My wife and I did not. So at the summit, I'm like, this is unacceptable. Like, I can't leave something unfinished. Like, I will obsess over it. It has to get done. I'm not a quitter. I have to finish. And so we were supposed to go back 2 years later. COVID happened. That was the year that I did the 50 miles. And so we were able to make it back last year, which was 4 years after the initial climb. And last year, my wife and I both summited.
Nice. So, okay. So then now, so we've talked about um, the summit. Now tell me about Trolltunga. That's how you say it, right?
Yeah, it's so there's this gnarly hike in Norway that uh it's round trip. The day is like a 14-hour day of just like nonstop, like up and down. That one was brutal because I was probably a bit unprepared for it. But basically you climb this massive hike that takes you to these gnarly, just like rock faces in these fjords in Norway. And there's this one rock called Trolltunga that's means troll's tongue, and it just juts out over, and there's just nothing. Like it's like a 4,000 foot drop or something from, and this rock just, so it's like cliff face, rock comes out, and then 4,000 feet below or something like that. And my wife was like having a heart attack. Like other people had to take the pictures of me on it because I got all the way out to the edge and like hung my feet over the edge. So that was a sweet day. It's so beautiful there.
Well,
We travel.
that's what I was going to ask you is how, I mean, obviously you're working a program. So, I mean, you obviously believe in a higher power. How did just being up there just make you feel like did it just like reaffirm like that there is definitely 100% something out there? You know what I mean? I can't
Yeah,
imagine being in a situation like that. Like,
yeah, I mean, nature, like I love it. I mean, being in like real nature, not like the metro parks, but like
right.
the fucking wilderness. Like there's no people. You can connect, I think, with the universe on like a different level. And I think in those moments, especially when doing really hard stuff like a hike or something like that, you're so present. Like you just have to be. It's almost like, I mean, it's painful, but also like meditative because you're so present and the beauty that you're surrounded with is everywhere. And I just feel like super plugged in when I do things like that. And so yeah, so I do a lot of stuff like that.
No, that's it's amazing, man. Like I said, I was reading your list of accolades and I was just like, this guy's a straight badass, dude. Like I can't even um it just and it's not just one or two things. You've done it for literally the last 10 years.
Yeah.
So it's my hat's off to you, man. You are the definition of a hardworking motherfucker. And yeah, man, I respect you. I do want to, so you're doing this ultra marathon and you're set to round it out next weekend, or the 15th. I think that's next weekend, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a week from tomorrow.
Yeah. So what's your training regimen been like with the ultra marathon? Is it, I mean, is your what's your diet like? What's your training regimen like?
Diet is shit, and training regimen is a fuck ton of miles.
So we're just
So
throwing a fucking Hail Mary. We're throwing a Hail Mary next week.
I mean, I eat well, but like race food is basically sugar, right?
Yeah.
So I mean, think
Yeah.
about like sports drinks, the goos, like it's just how much sugar can I get in my body to fuel these miles, right?
Yeah.
So I mean, some days I try to eat like good whole meals and stuff, but anytime I'm going, and I run so much recently that like you're, especially on these long runs, you're just eating like fucking lifesaver gummies and like Rice
Yeah.
Krispie treats, and like because it's like I need the most amount of calories I can get into my blood right now, in the fastest way possible. So, and then the running is I mean, so like the Ironman last year, I started training 4.5 months out from the Ironman, hadn't ran a half a mile before that. And but like when I set my like sights on something, it's like fucking tunnel
Laser
vision. Like
vision. Yeah.
I breathe, I live it, I breathe it, right? It's already done the moment I decide to do it. And so I came in too early, like I peaked basically like 3 to 4 weeks out on the Ironman training. I was like already ready to do it. So I wanted to try and avoid that, because it's the balance of like not trying to lose all my gains doing all these crazy endurance things, but also being physically fit and able to do it. So this time I actually started like 3 months out. So, but like I started a 6-month program at the 3-month mark. So like I had nothing. And just like threw myself in the fire, and it was just a lot. It's been a lot. Dude, the thing about endurance training that sucks is it's time consuming. I mean, it takes a long time to run 20, 30 miles on a Saturday, and then go do it again on Sunday. And then you got 12-mile runs on Tuesday and Wednesday, and throw that into the middle of like weight training and everything, work and family and meetings. And so it's a time consuming thing. And that's been the hard part of it.
Well, I can only imagine. It takes me the motivation that it takes me just to get on the elliptical or the treadmill for an hour is exhausting in itself. So I can't imagine what you go through.
It's cool though. It's cool watching like my body respond and adapt to the process of the training. Like the first month just sucks. Like I'm like breathing heavy. It doesn't feel right. But once you get in a groove and you can start watching like your mileage pace goes down and your heart rate going down. So now you're running faster and your heart rate's lower. And, you reach a point, which was crazy. This is the only time it's ever happened. And I mean, I've ran races before, but I don't think I've never properly trained for a race like this before. I reached that point for the first time where like, you're just running, dude. Like you're not thinking about anything. You're not thinking about your legs or how hard it is to breathe or where you're at mile wise. You're just like headphones in, just like zone, just running like. And that was a cool thing that's happened this time around with this training, because I'd never experienced that before.
That's awesome. So I'm gonna change gears here because we're starting to run down on time. So I want to talk a little bit about rebuilding relationships. I came across another comment in an article online where you had quoted your mom. It was something about you put your mom through the ringer. Can I read? You don't mind if I read it, do you?
No, go ahead.
It was just, I put my mom through the ringer. She was at every single court date. She would come and visit me. And then after the Kilimanjaro climb, it says your mom called you and she's like, all the sleepless nights were worth it. I knew you were meant for great things. And even reading, I've read that probably 8 times since I pulled it up. And even reading it just now, I got goosebumps because I hang my hat on my rebuilt relationship with my mother. And to read something like that and see that, I mean, I'm going to just assume you put your mom through the ringer. And that was a very strained relationship by the time you decided to get sober and clean your life up. So tell me a little bit about how you rebuilt that relationship, because I also think that rebuilding relationships are a huge factor in people's continued sobriety and continued success.
Yeah. I'm a firm believer in, actions. I think that with my parents, like I put them like through a lot. My mom was always there, she always supported me. Like I said, every court date she showed up. When I got clean, I think a lot of people get clean and they feel pretty fucking entitled about how their family should feel about them. And you didn't earn shit, you got to earn that trust back. You have to build that relationship. You have to show them with your actions who you are now, because all they know is who you've been for the last however many years. And personally, I was a piece of shit. I was not a good son. So when I got clean, I decided I was going to be a good son. And I did my best to live a life that reflected that. And so, it started with simple stuff like Mother's Day, like getting her flowers and taking her out to eat. On her birthday, getting her flowers, taking her out to eat. But really rebuilding the relationship was me just being like a good person and someone that she could be proud of and didn't have to worry about anymore, and didn't have to, someone she could trust with the keys to their house again and stuff like that, So just the only way that I can say it to rebuild is to like work on yourself, and become a good, like the best version of yourself, become a lovable son or daughter or husband or whatever. And usually organically those things will kind of like rebuild themselves.
Yeah, man. It's looking back on who I was, and it's a common issue, obviously, with all addicts. You just burn every bridge without any remorse. And then there's a lot of people on the other side of that, a lot of family members who aren't even willing to like extend that arm, even after years of sobriety or after years of. So anytime, it's funny because when my wife and I met, she used the example because she's got her master's degree, checks all the boxes on paper, never been in trouble, like has no business dating a guy like me, plain and simple.
Dude, my wife
That's
is the same way.
right. So
Literal thing.
but she always told me when we met, because this was a big issue in our relationship, I would always say, I don't understand what you see in me. And she would always revert back, because I had a lot of unhealed shit that took me the last 10 years to work through as well. So it's been 10 years of progress. And she always reverted back to the fact of, you were able to mend the relationship with your mother, which tells me you're not really a piece of shit. And I'm not saying that like guys that can't mend relationships are, you know what I mean? But that was her way of saying. So anytime that I came across this comment, and like I said, I read it 8 times, and even the 9th time reading it just now, I still got goosebumps, because it speaks to your character. I mean, to me, it does. You know what I mean? You may have been bad off to a point of what everybody thought was no return. My mom used to tell me she would lay awake at night waiting to get that phone call. Hey, we need you to come ID your son. So you may have been to that point, but the fact that she loves you, speaks to you now, I mean, that speaks volumes. So I had to touch on it because my mom listens to this every time. My mom's my number 1 fan, bro, but and I'm okay with it.
Yeah.
So okay, so you've rebuilt relationships. We're rounding out we're at about 2:15. I'm gonna be super respectful of your time. Tell me and I ask everybody this is kind of one of the last questions. What's your definition of success? How do you gauge success? How do you view success? What is your definition of success?
For me, I think it moves, my definition of success is, can I go to sleep tonight knowing that if I don't wake up, I did everything I could? And really, it's that simple for me. Like I try to give every single day everything I have. And if I feel, which I do today, there's been moments, but for the most part, I feel that I've done the best that I can to this point, then that's success, man. I mean, you have ideas of where you think you should be, or how long things should take, or how long things might take, but it's never fucking real. It never works out the way you thought it was going to. So I do the best I can, and I really try to push myself to grow, and I try to look back on the year and make sure that I'm a better man this year than I was last year. And for me, that's success.
Yeah, I agree with that wholeheartedly. And I ask that, I mean, obviously the people that I want listening to this aren't obviously the people that probably will listen to it, but I ask that because, you know, I've run into too many guys too many times who are like, I don't have a Bentley in the driveway, and I don't have a 10,000 square foot house, and I don't have $200,000 in the bank. And I'm like, that doesn't mean shit. Most of those dudes that have that are probably miserable in their day-to-day lives. I don't know for sure, but I'm very happy in my 2,000 square foot house with my two pickup trucks and my dogs and my wife. You know what I mean? And I go to bed at the end of every night and I can lay my head on my pillow, and my wife gets super pissed because I'm out like a light as soon as I put my head on that pillow. But for years, I was never able to do that. I would lay awake at night because U.S. Marshals are looking for me, or you know, I've ripped somebody off that day, or I'm beating myself up over the shit that I did the last week. You know what I mean? And so I get where you're saying, and I agree with you wholeheartedly, because my definition of success is very similar to yours. It's I want to be able to lay my head on my pillow, and if I pass in my sleep, I know that I was at least trying my best. You know what I mean? I was doing the next best thing. I was trying my hardest. Um, so what advice would you give anybody maybe coming out of prison, anybody fresh out in their first day, week, month sobriety, anybody just out there struggling? Even I know there's quite a few people that, I mean, have never been to prison and just struggle with depression, day-to-day life out there that listen to the show. So what advice would you give somebody struggling?
I mean, you know, I think that, I guess my advice would be get the help that you need, right? Get the support you need. For me, I can speak on my experience, and my experience was I needed help, and I realized I couldn't do it on my own. It wasn't a problem that I could fix by myself. I couldn't think my way out of it. The solution was to reach out and get the help that I needed to get started, and then continue down that process and that path, focusing on making myself better, healthier, and overcoming that struggle. You know, early on, it's substances, right? You know, it's drugs, it's alcohol and stuff like that. But I mean, down the road, it's not the substances anymore. Once you put some time under your belt, it's the thinking, right? It's
Yeah.
because I can get myself in all sorts of fucking trouble without using drugs and alcohol, right?
Right.
So it's you know, it's working a good program, working steps, reaching out, staying well connected with support groups, staying well connected with people who call you on your shit, and make sure that you're not, you know, getting closer to the edge, making sure you're kind of near the center, you know,
Yeah.
because all the things that we just talked about, all the things that I have today, which is fucking great life, I have it because I got the help that I needed, and I continue to rely on those tools that were given to me and work that, you know, work a program. Without that, you know, I wouldn't have any of this shit, and I could burn it down just as fast as way faster than I built it, you know?
Yeah.
So I think it's realizing that you know, if you're, whether it's mental health, there's mental health professionals, you know, with addiction stuff, there's services for addiction. There's, you know, there's 12-step meetings. There are plenty of people out there who can help you with your situation and overcoming what's going on. But for years, I convinced myself that I could do it on my own. I could do it on my own. And I couldn't. It wasn't until I actually reached out and got the help I needed that anything changed.
Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly with every bit of that. And you know, it's a big part of it too, is like you said, there will come a point where the drugs and the substances are no longer the issue. It becomes a this issue, or it becomes a hard issue, or it becomes a think, you know what I mean? And if the drugs and getting off the drugs, to me, after 10 years, that was the easier part out of dealing with the trauma and the illogical thinking and the irrational thinking and the like the weird thoughts and stuff like that. It's because you have to retrain your whole self. And
Yeah, but that's
that's
the beauty,
yeah.
right? That's also the beauty of it, is that
Oh yeah.
we're equipped with a set of tools to be able to reprogram how we think and view the
Yeah.
world. And then that continues to manifest itself in our lives for as long as we're willing to do the work, you know? I mean, we had developed like a bad operating system, and you know, rebuilding that is not an easy task. It's not easy to look at yourself and look at that fucked up shit you did and look at who you are today and look at the nasty shit that you're still thinking and all that stuff, and do the work to fix that stuff. But you know, there's the honesty part again. Honesty, being honest with yourself, you know, looking at, okay, like, how could I, this still bothers me, this still lingers, how can I work through this, how can I address this so that it's not, you know, ever present. I feel like being in recovery is like a game of whack-a-mole, like something's always popping up, and I address it and the volume goes down on that thing, but the volume's turning up on something else. And so I'm just, you know, doing the best I can to address what I can when I can.
No, man, all that was awesome. And you're absolutely right. It's and and the wild part is when you're using substances, that numbs it all. So you're obviously not actively working on it. You're not, you know what I mean? But it's the real work comes in after you take the substances out of the equation. So well, James, I'm going to wrap this because I know I'm pushing a little bit over on what we agreed on, and I just want to say a few things real quick. I think what you're doing is amazing. I love your ambition, your drive. I love the fact that you push yourself harder every year. That's you are what somebody in recovery should strive for. You know, you've reestablished relationships, you push your body to the next level, you started your own business. It's But I also want everybody to know and everybody to understand it takes hard work. I saw your video on Facebook earlier today. I think it was from a few days ago, and you're like, you have to fucking put in the work. Like, you didn't just fall where you're at. You have worked 10 years to make these achievements, to start this business, to get your business to where it's at, to be who you are. And who you are today is phenomenal. I don't know you. I'll say I think you're fucking great just from everything that I've read and talking to you for this last hour. I think, I mean, and obviously you're a human being. I know you got flaws. I got flaws. Everybody's got flaws, but if anybody wants somebody to look up to, it should be somebody such as yourself. I think you have a lot to offer guys in recovery. I hope you're working with some guys in recovery, even if it's only a few. I know you're busy. We don't have to get into any of that, but I just want to say thank you. Thank you for coming on. Thank you for sharing your story. Thank you for giving me some of your time. To anybody that sees this before next weekend, I will be down there to congratulate you at the finish line as well. It is October 15th at 10 a.m. is when the festivities start. It is down in Kenmore, down by Just a Dad for Akron, the clothing shop, our boy Kenny. So to wrap this again, James, I thank you. I'll be down there supporting you. And to be honest with you, we're friends on Facebook now. I'll be supporting you in all your endeavors moving forward as it is. So I appreciate you. Thank you. I'm going to go ahead and wrap this. Guys, thanks for checking us out. Also, hey, tell everybody real quick where they can find you.
All right. So website's jamesandersonambition.com. Instagram is Anderson_ambition. Facebook, James Anderson Ambition.
Okay. My son does my web design, so he's going to put together a plugs section. He's in the middle of doing it now. I'll put all your links and info for personal training. I'll put all your stuff up there as soon as it comes, as soon as he gets that running. So
Awesome. Thank you.
yeah. Again, I thank you. I look forward to meeting you in person next weekend. Thank you for, I think your story is amazing, and I think it'll help. And I think it probably already has helped tons and tons of people, just to understand that there's light at the end of the tunnel, and you can build an amazing life for yourself after you put in the work. So,
Yeah.
James, I appreciate you. I'm going to let you go, and signing off, guys. We will catch you next time.